So one question says, what does this mean for children's rights?
Particularly affects their life, the right to survival and development. So if we're thinking about children's rights, all human rights are children's rights as well. But given their age and vulnerability, their additional rights are bestowed on children. So beyond all our frameworks for human rights, we have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child as well, which bestow these additional rights on children. So it affects the climate crisis affects a number of rights right across the convention. Most obviously, given what I've said, is the right to survival and development. It affects things like access to housing, nutrition, particularly if we're thinking about climate-related shocks. Things like water pollution, impacts in terms of nutrition, and then access to things like recreational spaces. Children have a right to play and to rest, good education. It can impact in terms of their schooling, in terms of those disruptions that are caused by the climate crisis. I suppose within rights, the rights of children who are refugees is a particular thing to consider, given that we have an increasing number of climate-related refugees, and like those processes I spoke about earlier in terms of disruption to social support, additional support needs to be given to these children, given the fact that they're likely displaced in a quite a traumatic and difficult manner from existing support systems that they have. So it affects rights right through in terms of protection, life and survival and development, and also access to good quality education, healthcare, etc. It also impacts in terms of Article 2 of the UNCRC in terms of no discrimination, because we know that some groups are disproportionately affected. So the impact of the climate crisis disproportionately impacts children growing up in low and middle income countries, where there might be less support services, or the infrastructure might be more vulnerable to disruption. So then that impacts on children growing up in those contexts more. We know girls are more disproportionately affected by the impact of climate change. Those living in geographically vulnerable areas, those who are experiencing precarious housing. So it affects children and young people differently depending on where they live, the other support structures they have, other demographics like that. It also implicates Article 12 in terms of the right to be heard, because we look at responses to climate change. For the most part, the voices of children and young people are explicitly missing it within that context. So it affects rights right through the gamut if we're looking at that particular framework of the UNCRC.